The elevator doors opened and my neighbor grabbed my arm, whispering, "Someone comes to your penthouse every day." I forced a laugh, until she described the exact coat I had never seen Ethan wear. From that moment, every kiss tasted like suspicion. When I finally checked the camera footage, I understood. The man who held the key to my home was not just a lover, he was the key to my entire fortune. My name is Hallie Medina. At 34, I am the Chief Executive Officer of Northbridge Pictures, a studio I built from whispered pitches in coffee shops into a name that makes the legacy companies nervous. My life is a series of calculated risks, boardrooms, and relentless schedules, all managed from the 48th floor of the Skylark Tower in Weston City. The penthouse is my fortress, my sanctuary, the one place where the polished armor is supposed to come off. That evening, the armor felt heavier. The private elevator, usually a smooth, silent ascent, felt like a pressure chamber. The doors slid open onto my private landing, and I was already fumbling for my fob when a voice sliced through the quiet. "Mrs. Medina?" I turned. Eloise Grant, my neighbor from 47B, a woman I rarely saw and only ever exchanged strained pleasantries with, was standing there, her hands clutching her silk robe closed. Her eyes were wide, darting toward my front door and back to me. "Eloise, is everything all right?" She took a step closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that raised the hairs on my neck. I apologize for this. It is truly not my business, but I work from home. My desk faces the landing." I waited, my keys cooling in my hand. "Someone comes to your penthouse every day, Mrs. Medina," she breathed. "While you are at work, a man." A chill that had nothing to do with the building's air conditioning swept over me. I tried to manufacture a polite smile. "Eloise, that's very kind of you to look out, but that's just my husband, Ethan. He's an artist. His schedule is flexible." Eloise shook her head, a small, violent motion. "No, not your husband. I have seen your husband. This man is different, taller. He wears a very specific coat." The corridor suddenly felt too bright, the polished marble floor reflecting the track lighting like a funhouse mirror. I glanced past her shoulder at the security camera mounted in the corner. A small, blinking red light was static. The lens was dark. A placard, freshly printed, was taped neatly below it. "Temporary system maintenance." "A coat?" I asked, my voice tight. "Yes," she said, gaining confidence. "A dark green wool, almost black, with a wide collar, and, this is strange, but I smelled it when he passed. Cedarwood, a very strong, woodsy smell. My blood didn't just run cold. It froze solid. Cedarwood. Ethan smelled of sandalwood, old books, and the faint metallic tang of his guitar strings. He was allergic to pine and related scents. Cedarwood gave him migraines. I had never, not once in our 5 years together, seen him in a green wool coat. "When did you see him?" I managed. "Today, about 3 hours ago, around 4. He uses a key." 3 hours ago, at 4 o'clock. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't need to check it. Ethan's text had come through at 4:30. "Studio session running late. Babe, don't wait up. See you after 8. "Thank you, Eloise," I said, my voice sounding distant. "I will look into that." She nodded, relief flooding her face as she retreated to her own door. "Of course. Good night, Mrs. Medina." I stood alone on the landing for a full minute, staring at the dark camera. Maintenance. How convenient. I remembered an email from building management that morning, a last-minute update to the security firmware. It was scheduled for next week, but an urgent patch had supposedly pushed the timeline up. No one else had been on the elevator up. I turned my fob, the lock clicking open with a sound that was suddenly offensive, invasive. I pushed the heavy door open. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Amberwood, a thick, cloying, expensive scent. A scented candle was burning on the console table. I stared at it, my stomach tightening. Ethan hated amberwood. He said it smelled like a rich person's funeral. He only ever lit the citrus or vetiver ones I bought. The second thing was the silence, which was absolute. The third was the perfection. Our home was beautiful, but we lived in it. Ethan, for all his artistic soulfulness, was messy. He left sheet music on the kitchen island, his jackets over the chairs, his shoes by the door. Tonight, the penthouse was not just clean, it was sterile. It looked staged. The coffee table books were fanned out in a perfect, impersonal triangle. The velvet cushions on the sofa were all chopped, sharp and severe. It was the look of a high-end hotel suite just before check-in. It was the look of a place where someone had meticulously erased every trace of their presence. "Ethan," I called out. No answer. The silence stretched, thick with the scent of burning amber. I walked past the living area, toward the studio. His guitar was in its stand. Cold. I moved down the hall to our bedroom. The bed was made, not with our usual hurried tug of the duvet, but with tight hospital corners. A cashmere throw blanket I didn't recognize was folded at the foot of it. I was reaching for it when his voice made me jump. "Hallie, God, you scared me. I didn't hear you come in." Ethan was standing in the doorway, a towel around his neck, his hair damp. He was smiling. That devastating, easy smile that had charmed investors, critics, and me. He moved to kiss me, but I offered my cheek. His lips were warm. He smelled of my soap. "Long day?" he asked, already turning away, walking toward the kitchen. He was performing. I knew his moods, his rhythms, the cadence of his voice. This was his warm, attentive husband script. It was a role he played when he wanted something, or, I realized with a sickening jolt, when he was hiding something. "You could say that," I said, following him. I watched him open the refrigerator, all fluid grace. "The studio ran late?" "Beyond late," he scoffed, pulling out a bottle of water. "Miles is having a full-on crisis about the bridge on the new track. We must have run it 50 times. I'm completely fried. But I think we finally cracked it." He turned, his eyes bright. "It's going to be the anchor for the new album. I'm even thinking about the tour." He was talking too fast, filling the space, directing the scene. He was steering me away from the silence, away from the wrongness of the apartment. He was a conductor, and I was the orchestra he was silencing. I moved to the bar, needing a drink, water, whiskey, anything. My eyes landed on a glass sitting on the black marble countertop, beside the ice bucket. It was a heavy-bottomed tumbler, the kind Ethan used for his bourbon. I preferred a delicate, tall glass for my own. The glass wasn't empty. A small amount of amber liquid was pooled at the bottom, but it was the rim that held my gaze. A faint, waxy, almost imperceptible ring was smudged on the lip. It wasn't my shade. It wasn't lipstick at all. Not really. It was more like a balm or a gloss. But it was greasy, and it was not mine, and it was not Ethan's. I looked at Ethan. He was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone, blissfully unaware of the spotlight I had just trained on him. "I thought you were going to be late," I said, my voice neutral. "Your text said after 8? He glanced up, not missing a beat. "I know. We wrapped just after 4:30, and I figured I'd surprise you. Got home maybe an hour ago. Jumped straight into the shower." 4:30. Eloise saw the man at 4:15. He used a key. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from our building's portal. "Reminder. Security system maintenance on floor 48 is now complete. We apologize for any inconvenience." The lies were stacking up so fast they were building a wall between us. The text message, the timeline, the camera maintenance, perfectly timed. The cedarwood coat, the amberwood candle, the immaculate, soulless room, the foreign glass. Ethan looked up, his smile faltering slightly at my silence. "You okay, Hal? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just tired," I said. Picking up the tainted glass, I held it up. "Figured I'd join you." His eyes flickered to the glass, just for a second, and then back to me. There it was, a flicker of something cold. Panic. It was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that easy warmth. "Tough day," he said, nodding. Let me pour you a fresh one. You deserve it. He took the glass from my hand, his fingers brushing mine, and walked to the sink. I watched him rinse it out, the water washing away the evidence, but he was too late. I had already seen it. He turned back, holding a clean glass, the performer back in place, but I was no longer his audience. I was the director, and I had just seen the fatal flaw in his script. I smiled at him, a brittle, sharp thing. Thank you, darling. As he poured my drink, I made a decision. There would be no accusations, no screaming matches, no scenes. This was my company. This was my home. Someone had violated it, and my charming, artistic husband was either the perpetrator or the accomplice. I would not ask. I would not confront. I would listen, I would watch, and I would wait. I slept in the guest suite. Telling Ethan a looming international distribution deadline required my undivided attention. The sheets were cold, the silence absolute. I was awake at 5 a.m., my mind not racing, but methodically cataloging the cedarwood, the amber candle, the staged perfection of the room, the cloned entry time. At 6:30, I was at the kitchen island, my laptop open, feigning a deep dive into quarterly reports, when Ethan emerged, tousled and stretching. He was the very picture of the handsome, carefree artist, a stark contrast to my corporate armor. He padded over to the espresso machine, the silence stretching between us, punctuated only by the click of my keys. You had company yesterday, I said. I did not look up. He paused, his hand on the portafilter. What? Before I got home, you had company. You left a glass on the bar. He let out a short, practiced laugh. It was a puff of air, slightly exasperated, designed to disarm. God, is Eloise Grant timing my bathroom breaks now? I swear that woman watches the landing like it's a hawk sanctuary. His immediate pivot to Eloise told me everything. He knew he had been seen. This was not a surprise. It was damage control. It was Miles, he said, slamming the portafilter into place. The hiss of the steam machine filled the air. My studio partner, I mentioned him, right? The one having a meltdown over the bridge on the new track. Miles, I repeated, my voice flat, robotic. The one you were at the studio with until after 4? He came from the studio, Ethan said. He did not turn around. He was busy focusing on the precise tamp of the coffee grounds. He left his primary hard drive here last week, in my studio bag. He was panicked. I was stuck in the session. I just told him to grab my spare fob from the magnetic lockbox under the entryway console and let himself in. He must have grabbed a drink while he was waiting for the elevator. He's a nervous guy. Jitters all the time. A spare fob, in a lockbox. It was a clean explanation. It was plausible. It explained the access. It almost explained the glass. He must have cleaned up, too, I said. The place was immaculate. He even lit a candle. He's weird like that, Ethan mumbled, the espresso pulling dark and fast. Super particular. Probably felt bad about intruding. Why are you grilling me? Hal? It was just Miles. He turned, holding a cup, offering it to me. The perfect, attentive husband. But his explanation did not cover the smell of cedarwood on a man supposedly rushing to retrieve a hard drive. It did not explain the amberwood candle, a scent Ethan despised, and it did not explain the gut-deep feeling of violation, the sense of a performance being staged in my own home. I declined the coffee. I have to get to the office. I did not go to the office. I went to the lobby. Ramon Hale, the head concierge, was at the main desk, his uniform impeccable. He smiled warmly when he saw me. Mrs. Medina, good morning. Is everything to your satisfaction? Ramon. Yes, mostly, I said, affecting a breezy, slightly annoyed tone. I think one of the new cleaning staff might have misplaced a delivery, a small courier box. Could you possibly check the access logs for my landing? Say yesterday, late afternoon? Of course, Mrs. Medina. Anything for you. His fingers flew over his keyboard. Floor 48, yesterday, let's see, around 4 p.m.? That sounds right. He frowned, leaning closer to his monitor. That's unusual. My heart, which had been beating in a slow, controlled rhythm, gave a painful kick. What is? The system logs an entry at 4:15 p.m., fob 02. That's Mr. Cole's fob. Yes, he told me his partner stopped by to pick something up. Right, Ramon said, his eyes scanning. But the system also logs fob 02 at the garage-level elevator at 4:14 p.m. and again at the front entrance at 4:20. My blood turned to ice water. Simultaneously? It must be a system glitch. Mrs. Medina, a data echo? It's impossible for one fob to access 3 different entry points in less than a minute. The system must be cross-logging. It was not a glitch. It was a cloned fob. 2 signals, 1 identity. 1 fob, the clone, was opening my front door at 4:15. The other, Ethan's, was being used in the garage moments later, building his alibi of just getting home from the shower when I arrived. And the camera? I asked, keeping my voice light. The maintenance was very last minute. I'm glad it's resolved. Ramon's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. Maintenance email? I'm not aware of any maintenance on the 48th floor. Mrs. Medina, the system-wide firmware update isn't until next Tuesday. The placard, I insisted. It said temporary maintenance. He typed again, his face growing paler. Ma'am, your camera is marked offline. It's showing a hard fault, not maintenance. It's been dark for almost 48 hours. I assumed you had requested it be disabled for privacy. Why would you assume that? Well, he stammered, the request to disable the audio feed for the landing came from your private email last week. I had made no such request. Please dispatch engineering immediately, I said, my voice sharp and cold. Of course, right away. I walked back to the elevator, my heels clicking on the marble like gunshots. The maintenance hadn't been pushed up. It was a lie. My camera had been blinded, and my audio feed severed, all using my own authority. Back in the penthouse, the silence was suffocating. I went to my private mailbox by the service entrance, bills, industry trades, and a thick cream-colored envelope, heavy as linen. The return address was just an embossed logo, an interlocking NB. I slid it open. Inside, a heavy cardstock invitation. The Northbridge Talent Fund invites you to its inaugural gala. I had never heard of it. Northbridge Pictures was my company. This was not, it was a phantom, a mimic. I flipped to the host committee page, scanning the names, and then I saw it, at the very top, in elegant script, Hallie Medina, founding benefactor. At the bottom of the invitation was a welcome letter. We are so grateful for your foundational support, without which this endeavor to foster new voices would not be possible. And beneath it, reproduced with chilling, digital perfection, was my secure signature, the one I only used for high-level studio contracts and SEC filings, the one locked behind 3-factor authentication and biometric scans. Someone had not just forged my name, they had stolen my identity. I dropped the mail on the counter. My pulse was a trapped bird. I walked, fast, to our master suite, to the walk-in closet. Ethan's side was meticulous. Cashmere sweaters folded, suits aligned by color. It always smelled of sandalwood and old books. But not today. Today, faint but sharp, was the scent of cedarwood. I pushed past his jackets. Tucked in the back, behind a leather garment bag, was a dark green wool coat with a wide, dramatic collar. It was the coat Eloise had described. I touched it. The wool was heavy, expensive, and utterly foreign. I buried my face in the collar. Cedarwood, overpowering, a scent that gave my husband migraines. Then I saw the other items, shoved onto the shelf above, the cream-colored cashmere throw that had been on our bed 2 nights ago. I pulled it down. It was softer than anything I owned, and clinging to the fibers, stark against the light wool, was a single, long, jet-black hair. Not my honey blonde, not Ethan's dark brown. He came home late that night. I was sitting in the dark living room, waiting. I had not turned on the lights. The green wool coat was draped over the armchair opposite me. He flipped on the switch, and the room flooded with light. "Hallie? Jesus, what are you doing sitting in the—" He saw the coat. He stopped. His body went rigid. For the first time since I had met him, his mask did not just slip, it shattered. He was pale, his eyes wide with genuine, primal fear. "What is this, Ethan?" I asked. He stared at the coat as if it were a snake. He tried to build a smile, but his lips trembled. It's a coat. Hal, where did you find that?" "It was in your closet. It smells of cedarwood. You are violently allergic to cedarwood." "It's Miles!" The lie came out too fast, too loud. "It has to be. He must have left it. When he grabbed his hard drive, he must have stuck it in the closet to get it out of the way." "He came in, grabbed a drive, had a drink, lit a candle I know you hate, and then hid his expensive coat in the back of your closet? And you, the man who notices a book out of place, didn't see it?" "I was in the shower. Hallie, I told you." "And this?" I held up the cashmere throw. I did not mention the hair. I just held it. His composure snapped. The fear vanished, replaced by a sudden, scalding anger. It was a performance, but it was a good one. "What is this? Hallie? Is this an interrogation? I'm gone for one afternoon and you think I'm, what, lying to you? Cheating on you? You're tearing the apartment apart over a coat?" He advanced on me, his voice rising, vibrating with manufactured indignation. "You need to relax. You are working too much. You've been wound so tight for 6 months you can't even see straight. You're paranoid. It is a coat. It is a candle. My friend stopped by. You need to get a grip, Hallie, or you are going to have a complete and total breakdown." He snatched the coat from the chair. "I'll give this back to Miles tomorrow. I'm going to bed." He stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. The sound echoed in the massive apartment. The gaslighting was masterful. It was so total, so aggressive, that for a split second, I questioned myself. Am I overworked? Am I paranoid? No. The cloned fob, the offline camera, the stolen signature on a phantom fund. This was real. He was not hiding an affair. An affair was small. An affair was banal. This was bigger. He was hiding the coat. He was protecting the visitor. He was part of an operation. The next day, I did not go to the office. I went to a specialty electronics store in a nondescript downtown strip mall. I paid in cash. I bought 3 microdot audio recorders, barely the size of a button, and 2 pinhole cameras, the kind that run on a battery loop for 72 hours. I returned to the empty penthouse. I became a technician. I installed them myself. 1 camera in the ventilation grate by the front door, its lens covering the entire entryway. The second in the spine of an art book on the kitchen island, aimed directly at the bar. The audio recorders were placed in the living room, the kitchen, and my own home office. For 3 days, I watched, I listened. Nothing. The footage was hours of agonizing silence. Ethan was a model husband. He was home early, he cooked dinner, he practiced his guitar. He texted his manager about gigs. He was clean. The apartment was clean. I started to feel the paranoia creep back in, the acidic doubt. Had I been wrong? Had his outbursts scared them off? Had I imagined the whole thing? The 72 hours were almost up. The batteries were dying. I was losing my mind. I went back to the building logs. I could not let go of the cloned fob. I scrolled back. Not just one day, but weeks. Fob 01, mine. Fob 02, Ethan. Fob 01, Fob 02. And then I saw it. A new entry. This one wasn't Fob 01 or 02. It was logged as ID SVC undes, service, undesignated, a ghost key. It had accessed my floor, yesterday, at 3 p.m., when I was in a budget meeting and Ethan was supposedly downtown at a rehearsal. An undesignated service key. This was beyond Ethan. This was an inside job within the building itself. I walked to my home office. Behind a false-backed bookshelf, disguised as a panel, was my personal safe. It was fireproof, biometric. It held my original birth certificate, my mother's jewelry, and a significant amount of non-registered bearer bonds, my get-out-of-jail fund, an emergency parachute I had kept since my 20s. I took a small UV pen from my desk drawer. I uncapped it. I drew a thin, invisible line along the top edge of the safe's dial. I drew another line along the metallic seam of the door, where it met the frame. If they were just after my husband, they would not touch this. If they were just after my company, they would not touch this. But if they were after me, all of me, they would... I switched off the overhead light and clicked the pen. The blue-white line glowed against the black metal. A silent, fragile tripwire. Now, I just had to wait for a hand to break it. The UV pen was in my hand before Ethan's alarm clock went off. I moved through the silent, gray light of the pre-dawn, my bare feet making no sound on the cold marble floor. I slid the false panel back and knelt before the safe. I clicked the pen. The thin, invisible line I had drawn across the dial was gone. My breath did not hitch. I did not gasp. I simply registered the fact. They had been here. They had touched it. My pulse remained a slow, cold drumbeat. Wiping the dial was amateur. It was what a panicked thief would do. I had anticipated it. I aimed the small blue light lower, at the antique silver tray on the shelf just beneath the safe's keypad. I had placed it there for aesthetics, but I had marked its raised, ornate edge. A hand, even a gloved one, would brace against it to steady itself while working the dial. The mark was there, but it was not a clean line. It was a greasy, iridescent smear. They had worn gloves. Yes, they were professionals, but they had wiped the dial first, transferring the invisible ink from their glove to the tray when they braced themselves to input the code. They were thorough, but they were not perfect. They were human, and they were hasty. They had been inside my safe. I slid the panel back, the click inaudible. The bearer bonds were gone. The jewelry was gone. They had left the birth certificate. This was not a smash and grab. This was liquidation. An hour later, I was in my car, not my office. I was using a secure burner phone to call the Skylark Towers head of security, bypassing Ramon at the front desk. "This is Mrs. Medina in the Penthouse," I said, my voice clipped. "I need a full diagnostic on my landing camera, and I want the access logs for my floor for the last 72 hours, all levels, service, residential, and garage." The security chief, a man named Peters, sounded flustered. "Mrs. Medina, we were just preparing a report. There seems to have been a system-wide firmware update last night that corrupted the logs for several of the upper floors, yours included." "Corrupted?" "The access logs are abnormally empty, ma'am. Wiped clean. It's highly unusual. Engineering is blaming the update patch, but what, Mr. Peters? The patch was only authorized for the lower floors. It should never have touched your system. So, someone manually triggered a data wipe on my floor and disguised it as a firmware update," I stated. It was not a question. There was a heavy pause. "And the camera? Ma'am, it wasn't maintenance. The internal wiring was severed. It was deliberate. We are treating this as a high-level breach." "No," I said, my voice freezing him. "You will treat this as a system error. You will tell no one, not even your own staff. You will restore the camera, but you will give me the only access feed. Do you understand?" "Ma'am, that is highly irregular." "Mr. Peters, my husband and I are the highest-paying residents in this building. Your job depends on my satisfaction. Treat this as a system error, or I will treat your employment as one. Fix the camera. Send the private link to this number." I hung up before he could answer. The safe was breached. The logs were wiped. The camera was blinded. The physical defenses were gone. Now, the digital. I drove to a small, windowless office I leased under a shell corporation. It contained nothing but a chair, a desk, and a single, air-gapped laptop. I powered it on. I did not check my Northbridge email. I did not check my primary personal accounts. I opened a browser and logged into a secondary. Junk email account. one I used for retail shipping and unimportant subscriptions. The inbox was full of spam, but the sent folder was not. There was an email, sent 2 days ago, at 3:17 in the morning. I had been fast asleep. I clicked it. It was addressed to an acquisitions lawyer at a private equity firm I had never heard of, with a carbon copy to the Northbridge Talent Fund, the phantom organization from the invitation. The subject line was, "Authorization for temporary share transfer." My stomach hollowed out. I read the body. It was written in my voice, crisp, professional, authoritative. It confirmed a private agreement and authorized the temporary non-collateral transfer of 12% of my personal shares in Northbridge Pictures to the fund, pending a board vote I had apparently scheduled for the following week. Attached to the email was a single file, H. Medina Digital Signature SEC, PDF. I did not have that file on my computer. I did not have it on any computer. My digital signature was held on a physically encrypted key, kept in my office safe at Northbridge headquarters, and used only by me and my general counsel, Tessa. I left the secure site and drove to my office. I told my assistant to hold all calls. Inside my office, I accessed the corporate IT logs. I was looking for a breach. I found it. 3 weeks ago, someone using a C-suite level administrative password, not mine, had accessed the server where the file for the Berlin distribution deal was stored. They had isolated the signature block from that contract. They had digitally extracted my signature, reverse-engineered it into a usable file, and then, 2 days ago, used it to authorize the transfer of 12% of my company. The access log for the extraction was time-stamped at 2:17 a.m., a classic hacker's move, burying their work in the dead of night. But I was CEO. I had access to the root server logs, the ones that sat beneath the logs the hackers knew how to alter. The root log told a different story. The timestamp hadn't been 2:17 a.m. It had been changed to 2:17 a.m. The actual breach, the moment my signature was stolen, had occurred at 4:18 p.m. 3 weeks ago, the same day, the same time window, that Eloise Grant saw the man in the cedarwood coat enter my home. This was not a random hacker. This was an insider, someone with physical access to my home and administrative access to my company. My secure line buzzed. It was my private banker, a man I had known for 15 years. "Hallie," he said, his voice stripped of its usual warmth. "I'm flagging something, and I need a verbal confirmation before I lock your accounts." "Go ahead, Mark." "We received a request this morning to activate a limited power of attorney on your primary wealth accounts. It grants sweeping discretionary power. The digital paperwork it's perfect. Hallie, it has your signature. It has your notary stamp. It's routed from a known legal server." My throat was dry. Why didn't it go through? "It failed the final security step," he said. "The unverified request required a direct voice print confirmation from you. The system flagged the call attempt as non-human. It sounded like a poor synthesis. A bot. We've locked the account pending this call. Hallie, who am I dealing with here?" "You are dealing with me, Mark," I said, my voice shaking slightly, the first crack in my composure. "Lock everything. No access. No transfers. Not even for me. Without a live, in-person meeting at the bank. No exceptions. Consider it done." I hung up. They had my signature. They were testing my bank security. They had tried to use a deepfake of my voice. They were moving from theft to a total asset seizure. That night, Ethan was a different man. The anger from the coat incident was gone, replaced by a suffocating, solicitous charm. He had cooked dinner. He poured me a glass of wine. He was the man I had married. "You've been so stressed, Hal," he said, rubbing my shoulders as I sat at the table. His hands felt like spiders. "I've been thinking, we need to get out of the city. Just us." "Get out?" "I found this incredible rental in Redwood Bluff. Total isolation. Overlooks the ocean. No cell service. No internet. Just us. A fireplace. And a case of that bourbon you love. Let's go this weekend. Friday to Monday. No phones. No laptops. No Northbridge." He was trying to isolate me. He was trying to move me from my fortress to a remote location, a place with no service, no cameras, no witnesses. Maybe, I said, forcing a smile. Let me check my schedule. Don't check it, he whispered, kissing my neck. Just clear it. The next day, 2 things happened. The first was an email. It was anonymous, sent from a Proton account. There was no subject, no text, just one attachment. It was a photograph. It was me. Shot from a low, grainy angle. Looking up. I was in the elevator, my head down, looking at my phone. I recognized the moment. It was from that morning. The angle was impossible. It was from inside the maintenance panel of the elevator car. It was a threat. We see you everywhere. We are in the walls. The second event was a frantic call from Tessa Ward, my general counsel. Hallie, you need to come back to the office, now, or rather, you need to log into the secure board portal from home. Tessa, what is it? It's the draft amendments for the next board meeting. Someone from the COO's office just uploaded a new rider to the corporate bylaws. I've never seen it before. Hallie, it's terrifying. I logged in. My hands were shaking now. I navigated to the proposed amendments, and I saw it. A new article. Article 9. Section 4. Emergency Governance Protocol. It was dense legal text, but the meaning was brutally clear. It was a force majeure clause. In the event the CEO, me, was declared medically incapacitated, unreachable, or otherwise determined unable to perform their duties for a period exceeding 48 consecutive hours. All voting rights and executive operational control would not revert to the board. They would be transferred, immediately and automatically, to the Chief Operating Officer. Incapacitated. Unreachable. The weekend trip to Redwood Bluff, the place with no cell service. They were not trying to hack my bank account. They were not just trying to steal my shares. They were planning to make me disappear. The 48 hours would give them the window. The public link to my calendar, which my assistant found just moments later, was the logistics. They knew exactly where I would be. The digital theft was the setup. The legal change was the weapon. The isolated trip was the kill box. I closed the laptop. My vision narrowed. Ethan was the inside man. My COO, Caleb Rhodes, was the mechanism, and the man in the cedarwood coat was the ghost who moved between my worlds. This was beyond me. This was not a domestic dispute. This was a conspiracy to commit murder and grand larceny. I picked up the burner phone. I dialed a number I had kept in a physical address book, a name given to me by a former government contact, a name you only called when the threat was already inside the house. Harlow, a gravelly voice answered on the first ring. Nate, this is Hallie Medina. I have a situation. It's corporate, and it's personal. I need you off book, and I need you yesterday. Nate Harlow was not the kind of man you found in the phone book. He operated out of a sterile office above a print shop, a place that smelled of ozone and industrial cleaner. He was ex-corporate security, the kind of specialist companies hired to find billion-dollar leaks before they hit the press. He was all sharp angles and quiet observation, dressed in a suit that was functional rather than fashionable. He did not ask questions about morality. He dealt in data, access, and leverage. I sat opposite him, my hands clasped on the metal desk between us. I did not give him the full story. I did not mention the bearer bonds, the safe, or the green wool coat. I framed it as a hostile takeover attempt, a threat to my company. My COO, Caleb Rhodes, is making a power play, I stated, my voice flat. He's trying to trigger an emergency clause in the bylaws by locking me out of my own company. My husband, Ethan Cole, is acting erratically. I suspect he's being manipulated, or perhaps he's an active participant. The building's security is compromised. I slid a folder across the desk. Photos of Ethan, photos of Caleb, the empty access logs, the anonymous elevator photo, the proposed bylaw amendment. Nate looked at the file, not at me. He absorbed the data for several minutes in complete silence. He did not ask about the emotional component. He did not ask why I suspected my husband. "This is not a power play," he said finally, his voice a low gravel. "This is a decapitation strike. The bylaw change is the guillotine. The rest is just positioning the blade." "Can you find the links?" I asked. "I do not find links, Mrs. Medina," he replied, closing the folder. "I find choke points. You have an inside man in your home and an inside man in your company. They are already connected. You just need the picture." He requested 2 things: 24 hours and a significant retainer, wired to an offshore account. I authorized it from my burner phone before I even left his office. Nate Harlow worked faster than I had anticipated. The first report came not in 24 hours, but in 12. It was a single, encrypted email. The subject line was, "The choke point." I opened it in my secure office. It was a series of photographs, all time-stamped, all taken with a long focus lens. They were grainy, stark, and utterly damning. The first photos were of Ethan. He was leaving our building not through the front lobby, not through the garage, but through a sub-level maintenance tunnel that exited into an alley 3 blocks away. He was wearing dark glasses and a baseball cap, the very picture of a man trying not to be seen. He walked to a public parking garage, level C. The next photo stopped my heart. Ethan was standing next to a black sedan. He was talking to the man in the driver's seat. He was smiling. The man in the driver's seat was not Miles, his nervous studio partner. It was Caleb Rhodes, my chief operating officer. Caleb, the man who had worked shoulder to shoulder with me for 6 years. Caleb, who I had trusted with my company's most vital secrets. Caleb, the beneficiary of the emergency bylaw. Ethan was leaning in, talking animatedly. The next shot showed Ethan passing a thick manila envelope through the window. Caleb took it. This was the moment, the connection of the 2 worlds, the personal and the professional, the husband and the executive. They were not separate entities in a conspiracy. They were the core of it. I stared at Caleb's face in the grainy photo. He looked calm, authoritative, just as he always did in our 9 a.m. briefings. He was the perfect architect for this. He had the keys to the entire kingdom. He controlled the IT infrastructure. He could authorize a security patch, or fake one. He could blind a camera, wipe a log, or create a ghost ID for the service elevator. He had access to the secure corporate servers. He could lift my digital signature from a contract. He managed the board of directors' schedules. He knew when they met, what they read. He was the one who uploaded the bylaw amendments. Ethan was the key to my home. Caleb was the key to my company. They were a pair of matched blades, and I was standing between them. The surveillance report continued. Nate had not just followed Ethan, he had followed Caleb. After the handoff, Ethan had walked away, disappearing into the subway. Caleb, however, remained. A new series of photos began. 10 minutes later, a different man approached Caleb's car. This was the man Eloise had seen, taller than Ethan, wearing the distinctive dark green wool coat. The man whose scent, cedarwood, had been in my closet. He was carrying a small, heavy-looking suitcase. He got into Caleb's passenger seat. Nate's camera caught his profile. Unknown male. ID. Ghost. Caleb and Ghost drove to the Horizon Quarter, a luxury hotel in the financial district. They did not use the main entrance. They pulled into the service bay. A uniformed staff member met them, bypassing security entirely. The final photo in this sequence was of the 2 of them walking down a concrete service hallway. Caleb was checking his watch. Ghost was holding the suitcase. They looked professional, focused. They looked like they were on a job. Nate's report was concise. Subject Cole and Subject Rhodes are primary conspirators. Unknown male, Ghost, is logistics. I have placed active surveillance on Rhodes. The next update came that night. It was just an audio file, attached with no comment. Nate had managed to place a directional microphone near Caleb's usual table at a restaurant where he was meeting Ghost. The audio was muffled, full of clinking glasses and ambient noise, but 2 fragments were crystal clear. The first voice was Caleb's. The transfer failed. The bank locked her out. The voice print authorization was flagged. The second voice was different, deeper, rougher. It was ghost. It does not matter. The legal route was a bonus. The primary route is cleaner. Is the Redwood Bluff house confirmed? Caleb. Confirmed. Friday to Monday. Ghost. Is the package sufficient for a long rest? Caleb. More than enough, but the timing is critical. The board meets Tuesday. I just need 48 hours of her being unreachable. 48 hours. And the company is mine. 48 hours. The exact time frame stipulated in the emergency bylaw. A long rest. My vacation. My escape. They were not planning to make me unreachable. They were planning to make me incapacitated or dead. I authorized Nate's full budget. I told him to identify Ghost and to find the third link. If Ethan was the home front and Caleb was the corporate front, there had to be a legal front. Someone had drafted the Phantom Northbridge Talent Fund. Someone had drafted the power of attorney. It took Nate less than a day. His new report was simple. Ivy Lake. The name meant nothing to me, but to Nate, she was a flashing red light. Ivy Lake was a freelance attorney. She specialized in inheritance emergencies and rapid asset management. She was a legal ghost, moving between small boutique firms, specializing in clients who were old, sick, or suddenly deceased. Nate's file on her was chilling. She had been implicated 2 years prior in a major probate fraud case. A wealthy tech founder had died suddenly, and a near-perfect last-minute power of attorney had surfaced, diverting his entire estate to a charitable fund that was later traced to an offshore shell. Ivy Lake had drafted the documents. She had authenticated them, but she had walked. The case collapsed when the primary witness, the founder's nurse, died in a tragic car accident before she could testify. Ivy was the one who had tried to file the POA with my bank. She was the one who understood the nuances of corporate bylaws. Now I saw the whole machine, the three-headed snake. Ethan was the heart, the emotional access. He was the motive, the bitter, failed artist living in the shadow of his wife's success. He was the one who could open the door, who could plant the ghost, who could lure me to an isolated house. Caleb was the brain, the logistical infrastructure. He had the corporate power, the IT access, the ability to manipulate the board and rewrite the rules of my own company to catch my falling crown. And Ivy was the venom, the legal mechanism. She provided the gray framework, the paperwork that would make the theft look like a tragedy, that would turn murder into an orderly, emergency transition of power. They had built a perfect trap, and I was supposed to walk right into it. This Friday. Nate Harlow's office was pressurized. The air was still. He did not offer coffee. He simply gestured to the chair, and as I sat, he placed a thin black audio recorder on the metal desk between us. He pressed play. It has to be the bourbon. It's the only thing she'll drink that he won't. It's clean, it's fast, and it mimics cardiac failure. Classic, untraceable. The voice was rough, unfamiliar. The voice of ghost. Aconitine, Nate said. He did not look at me. He was staring at the wall, as if visualizing the data streams. Monkshood, wolfsbane. It's a paralytic poison. In high doses, it's instant, agonizing death. But in a microdose, it's a different weapon. It induces arrhythmia, respiratory distress, confusion, paralysis. It presents perfectly as a sudden, catastrophic stroke or a violent reaction to food poisoning. I sat rigid in the metal chair. The abstract thread of incapacitation had just become a chemical formula. They are not planning to make you unreachable, Mrs. Medina, Nate continued, his voice a flat monotone. They are planning to put you in a hospital. He had identified Ghost. The man in the green cedarwood coat was a former pharmaceutical chemist, dishonorably discharged from a major research lab for ethical violations. He was now a freelance problem solver. He was the specialist. And this was his blueprint. Nate laid it out, not as a theory, but as a forensic timeline of a crime that had not yet happened. but for which all the pieces were already in motion. The plan was for this weekend. At the isolated house in Redwood Bluff, Ethan, the loving husband, would pour me a celebratory drink, my favorite rare bourbon, the one he had surprised me with. The bottle would be laced with a precise microdose of aconitine. Within an hour, I would be violently ill. Respiratory distress, confusion, paralysis. Ethan, the terrified, worried husband, would call 911. By the time the ambulance navigated the remote, serviceless roads, I would be unresponsive. I would be admitted to a rural hospital, far from my own doctors, diagnosed with a severe, unexplained neurological event. And the 48-hour clock would begin. Nate slid a printed email across the desk. It was from Caleb, my COO, to the Northbridge board. As you know, Hallie has been under extreme stress. She is taking a much-needed, isolated vacation. I will be acting as her proxy. The moment I was declared medically incapacitated in that hospital, the force majeure clause in the bylaws would activate. Caleb Rhodes would assume full temporary executive control. He is not waiting for a vote, Nate said. He has scheduled an emergency board meeting for Monday morning, but his IT department just pushed a security update to the board's private portal. It's malware. It will hijack their proxy vote, automatically authorizing his control the moment he clicks send. While Caleb seized the company, Ivy Lake, the legal venom, would strike the assets. Nate had uncovered her filing. She had a new, limited power of attorney drafted. It was not the broad one that had failed the bank's security. This one was specific, citing my sudden illness and the need to stabilize company assets during a crisis. It authorized the immediate transfer of 18% of my personal shares to the Northbridge Talent Fund, the phantom entity, to ensure the company's stability. She will push it through the courts as an emergency measure, I whispered. She will walk it into a friendly judge's chambers, Nate corrected. Citing the CEO's life-threatening condition and the board's unanimous electronic proxy, it will be approved in 90 seconds. And Ethan? Ethan would be the star. He would be the tragic figure, the devoted husband, sitting by my hospital bed, weeping for the media. He would be the one screening my calls, blocking my lawyers, blocking my family. He would be the one telling the doctors, "She is very confused. She is not herself." He would be the one authorizing my care. This was the machine, efficient, brutal, and total. But there were pieces missing. The cloned fob, the dark camera. "Who is the inside man at Skylark Tower?" I asked. "The concierge," Nate said, without checking a file. "Ramon Hale, the one who smiled at you while he checked the logs. He has significant gambling debts. Caleb's offshore account made 2 payments to an unsecured lender in Macau, clearing Hale's markers. Ramon Hale. He was the one who took the maintenance order from Caleb. He was the one who physically cut the wire to my camera. He was the one who cloned Ethan's fob, creating the duplicate that Ghost used, the one that smelled of cedarwood. He was the one who wiped the logs and blamed a phantom firmware update. "He is the janitor," Nate said. "He cleans up the digital footprints." And then, Nate played the second recording. My own voice, clear as day. "Mark, it's Hallie. Please, I need this done. I authorize the transfer. Unlock the account." I recoiled. I had never said those words. Then, the recording continued, past my own voice. "The sibilance is still off," Caleb's voice said, annoyed. "The S in authorize is hissing. It sounds synthetic. Do it again." Ethan's voice. "I'm trying. The software is learning. Let me try the whole phrase again." He cleared his throat. "Mark, it's Hallie. Please, I need this done." I felt sick. They were training an AI. They were using the hours of voicemails I had left him, the interviews I had given, the board meetings I had led, to create a deep fake of my voice. The failed bank call was not a failure. It was a test. They were refining the model until it was perfect enough to bypass the human ear. "They do not just want the company, Mrs. Medina," Nate said. "They want the cash. The POA is for the shares. The voice print is for your liquid assets. This was the blueprint, but there was one more file. Nate hesitated. The first human gesture I had seen from him. There is a contingency, he said. I retrieved this from a deleted text string between Ethan Cole and the chemist. It appears your husband was getting nervous. He did not play the audio. He just showed me the transcript on his screen. Ethan. The dose. What if it's not enough? What if she wakes up in the hospital? What if she talks? Ghost. Then she does not stay in the hospital. The house in Redwood is isolated. It has a main staircase, polished wood, very steep. If she wakes up before the transfer is complete, she has a tragic accident. A fall. A fall. The staircase accident. The staircase accident. My vacation, my escape. They were not just planning to incapacitate me, they were planning to murder me. The aconitine was plan A. The staircase was plan B. I stood up. My legs were shaking. I walked to the window, staring at the print shop sign below. They had thought of everything. The access, the poison, the corporate mechanics, the legal finishing, the media narrative, and the cleanup. I'm canceling the trip, I said, my voice hollow. I am going to the police. No, Nate said. I turned. They are planning to murder me. And you will tell the police what? He countered, his voice sharp. That your husband and your COO are having suspicious meetings? That you heard an audio file you cannot legally prove is them? That you think they are training an AI? They will call it a domestic dispute. They will call it corporate paranoia. Ivy Lake will have them out in an hour, and you will be discredited as hysterical. Caleb will leak to the board that you are having a breakdown, which, conveniently, is exactly the narrative they need. He stood up. If you run, they scatter. They will delete the files, destroy the poison, and wait. They will wait 6 months, or a year, and they will try again. A different house, a different poison, a different accident. You will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. What then? I screamed. The sound was raw, tearing out of me. I just let them do it? No, Nate said, his eyes locking on mine. You do not run. You do not hide. You let them open the trap. Go to Redwood Bluff? I whispered, horrified. They want to poison you. They have the bottle. They have the plan. They feel safe. They feel arrogant. That is their weakness. The police cannot build a case on this, but they can respond to one. He leaned closer. We do not stop the crime. Mrs. Medina, we manage it. We let them walk into a room they think is dark, and we turn on the lights. You will go to Redwood Bluff. You will have dinner with your husband. You will let him pour the bourbon. He will kill me. No, Nate said, his voice dropping. Because my team will be in the walls, and you will be wearing a wire. And the bourbon they bring? It will not be the only bottle in the house. We are going to catch them, not in the planning, not in the conspiracy. We are going to catch them in the act. We are going to catch them with the poison in their hand. I did not return to Nate Harlow's office. The blueprint for my murder was not a document to be revisited. It was a map to be navigated. The fear from the night before, the cold dread that had settled in my stomach, had calcified. It was no longer fear, it was ballast. I went to my office at Northbridge Pictures. I walked past Caleb's glass-walled office. He was on a call, laughing, one hand gesturing expansively. He looked dynamic. He looked like a leader. He looked like a man who had just arranged to have me poisoned. I did not slow my pace. My first call was not to the police. It was to my head of public relations. Sarah, I said, my voice crisp. I'm making a change to my personal portfolio. I want a press release drafted immediately, top-tier distribution, Wall Street Journal, Hollywood Reporter. I want it out by noon. Of course, Hallie. What's the move? A new acquisition? A divestment, I said. Effective immediately. I am pledging 90% of my future personal dividends from Northbridge Pictures to a new foundational entity. We're calling it the Northbridge Scholastic Film Fund. It will support underprivileged storytellers in urban centers. There was a stunned silence. 90%. It was a figure that would gut my personal take-home by 8 figures a year. It was also the entire financial motive for Ethan and Caleb's plan. The shares they were trying to steal would be, for the foreseeable future, almost worthless from a dividend perspective. "Hallie," Sarah stammered, "that's monumental. Are you sure you don't want to run this past the board? The investors?" "It's my personal holding. Sarah, it's my decision. Draft the release. I want the headline to be Hallie Medina, Legacy over Profit. Run with that." I hung up. I was taking the bait off the hook. A predator who is not hungry is just a murderer. A predator who is hungry will rush, and a rushing predator makes mistakes. I knew this because Nate Harlow had already secured a carrier-level mirror of Ethan's phone, authorized by a judge in response to the wire fraud and deepfake voice recordings. A live feed of my husband's digital life was now streaming to Nate's secure server. At 12:05 p.m., the press release hit the wires. At 12:06 p.m., Ethan's phone lit up. It was a call from Caleb. We had the audio. Ethan's voice was a high-pitched, panicked squeal. "Did you see it? 90%. She's giving it away. Is she insane? What are we doing this for if there's no money left?" Caleb's voice was the sound of ice cracking, cold, sharp, and furious. "She's not insane, you idiot. She's having the breakdown. This is what erratic people do. This is good for us. It proves the incapacitation narrative. It proves she's not fit to lead." "But the money, Caleb, the POA, the shares, they're worthless." "The dividends are worthless," Caleb snapped. "The control is not. The voting shares are everything. This doesn't change the plan. It just accelerates it. She's a loose cannon. She has to be contained. This weekend, no delays, no mistakes." I closed the feed. I had rattled the cage. They were cornered, and they were still coming. My next move was to protect my flank. My parents, retired in Arizona, were my only true vulnerability. They were simple, loving people who would believe any lie Ethan told them. I used my burner phone to call Nate's logistics man. "The package in Arizona," I said. "It needs to move." Within an hour, a black car had arrived at their golf course community. They were told they had won an all-expenses-paid surprise vacation from a luxury travel company. They were overjoyed. By the time Ethan would have thought to call them, to use them as leverage, they would be settled at a secure, 5-star resort at Alder Lake, completely off the grid, with 2 of Nate's men posing as hotel security on their detail. Now for the company, I summoned Tessa Ward, my general counsel, to the secure conference room. I had not told her about the poison. I had not told her about the murder plot. I had only shown her the digital theft. Tessa was a small, immaculate woman whose mind was a fortress of corporate law. "Hallie," she said, closing the door. "This is staggering. Caleb and Ethan? A cloned fob? A deepfake voice? They are moving faster. Tessa, the press release I just issued? It was bait. They took it. They are planning to trigger the incapacitation clause this weekend." Tessa's face hardened. "The bylaw amendment? It's still just a proposal. It requires a full board vote. And Caleb controls the portal. He has the malware. He will fake the vote. Then we take the portal away from him," she said. She walked to the phone. "I am invoking Article 7 of the Corporate Charter, Emergency Security Protocol. I am declaring a system-wide threat from an unknown external party. I am freezing all pending amendments to the bylaws. Effective immediately. I am locking the board portal. No one, not even you or I, can upload a single document without a majority of the board physically present in this room." She began to dial. Caleb's primary weapon, the legal mechanism to seize my company, was being dismantled in real time. With the personal and corporate assets secured, there was only the final act. Nate arranged the meeting. It was at the district attorney's office, in a gray windowless room that smelled of stale coffee. It was me, Nate, and Tessa, facing 2 prosecutors from the Major Crimes Unit. We laid out the evidence, the cloned fob, the the severed camera wire, the expert analysis of the deepfake voice file, the illegal POA, the bylaw amendment, the bank records of Ramon Hale's gambling debts being paid by Caleb's offshore account. It's a strong case for conspiracy to commit fraud, the lead prosecutor said. We can arrest Rhodes and Lake tomorrow. No, Nate said. You arrest them, and the chemist walks, the husband walks, the aconitine disappears. This is not about fraud. This is attempted murder. He presented the file on Ghost, the chemist. He presented the audio file where they discussed a long rest. The prosecutor shook his head. It's circumstantial. Long rest isn't murder. We cannot get a warrant based on an interpretation. Then you will get it based on an overt act, Nate said. Tessa leaned forward. Gentlemen, this is not a domestic squabble. This is an organized crime. They are attempting to defraud the Securities and Exchange Commission, bypass federal banking regulations with synthetic voice data, and seize control of a $900 million corporation. The murder is simply the final transaction. We are offering you the entire conspiracy, packaged and delivered. The room was silent. What do you need? The prosecutor asked. We need a warrant to wire the Redwood Bluff house, Nate said. Audio and video, evidentiary grade. We need your team on standby, no more than 1 mile away, and we need you to witness the chain of custody for the evidence we provide. The prosecutor looked at me. You're the bait, Mrs. Medina. You understand that? If he makes a move, you are in that room alone. I understand, I said. The preparation was meticulous, a series of cold, calculated moves in a game of chess. First, Nate's team, posing as a utility crew, gained access to the penthouse. Ethan was at his studio, practicing his grieving husband's speech. They went to my bar. The rare, expensive bottle of bourbon, my favorite, was removed. In its place, they put a twin, a perfect duplicate, same label, same tax stamp, same weight, but this bottle was different. The bourbon inside was mixed with a harmless, food-grade solution saturated with an invisible, high-adhesion UV marker. Ethan will pack this bottle for the trip, Nate explained, back in his office. He will add his aconitine to it. When he touches the cork, his hands will be marked. When he pours the drink, the glass will be marked. It's a die pack. He will be caught, literally, blue-handed. Second, the technology. Nate gave me a new watch. It was a perfect copy of my own. This is your only defense, he said, strapping it to my wrist. The winder is a button. Press it once. It activates a high-intensity UV light. You'll see the ink. Press it twice, and it activates the silent alarm to the DA's team. It also contains a single, rapid assay filament in the strap. If any liquid hits this, it tests for aconitine alkaloids. It's your witness. Finally, we needed to force all players to move at once. I went home. I found Ethan in the living room, brooding, staring at the financial news ticker showing his insane wife's donation. I put on the performance of my life. I was exhausted. I was broken. I slumped onto the sofa next to him, my head in my hands. Ethan, I whispered, my voice thick. You were right. You were right about everything. I'm not myself. I'm working too hard. I'm paranoid. I think I'm having a breakdown. I saw his body tense, a predator scenting blood. He put his arm around me. Hal, no, you're just tired. I'm so sorry, I said, letting a tear fall. I'm sorry about the coat. I'm sorry I've been so distant. The press release. It was a panic move. I don't know what I'm doing. I looked up at him, my eyes wide. The trip, Redwood Bluff, can we still go? This weekend? Please, I need to get away. I need us to be us again. He held me, his embrace tight, proprietary. Of course, he whispered, kissing my hair. It's all I want. Hal, it's all booked. We'll leave Friday. I excused myself to take a bath. The moment I was out of sight, I watched my mirrored feed of his phone. His text to Caleb. She's in. She's broken. Redwood is confirmed. Caleb's reply. Good. It's time. Ivy is filing the emergency papers Friday at 5 p.m. Now for Caleb. I called Tessa. It's time. Spring the trap. Tessa, from her secure office, sent an email to the entire Northbridge Board of Directors. It was a masterpiece of controlled panic. Subject: urgent. Emergency board session requested. Body: in light of recent erratic corporate announcements and a potential breach of our bylaws, I am invoking a mandatory emergency session. All members are required to attend. A vote will be called. Friday, 11:30 p.m. No exceptions. The bait was in the water. Caleb's text to Ethan, via the mirrored feed, was immediate. Tessa is moving against us. She's called an emergency meeting for Friday night, 11:30. It doesn't matter. It will be too late. The incapacitation must be confirmed by the hospital before that call. You have to make the move at dinner. No later than 9 p.m. Do you understand? It has to be done by 9. Ethan's reply was a single word. Understood. The game was set. The board was arranged. Every piece was in motion. Every player assigned their part. I packed my overnight bag, my hand brushing against the cold metal of the watch. I was going to dinner with my husband. I was the bait, the witness, and the executioner, all in one. The house at Redwood Bluff was not a home. It was a stage. It sat perched on a jagged cliff, the Pacific tearing itself apart on the rocks below. The isolation was absolute. There was no cell service, just a weak, password-protected satellite internet line that Nate's team had already compromised. The lights were warm, low, and yellow, soft jazz. Ethan's Choice was already playing from hidden speakers when we arrived. It was a perfect imitation of intimacy, designed to cover the sound of a murder. Nate's team had been here, posing as an advance team from the rental company. They had swept the house, installing evidentiary-grade pinhole cameras in the living room, kitchen, and at the top of the polished wood staircase. The watch on my wrist felt heavy, a cold shackle of steel and technology. Ethan was electric, his performance dialed to its peak. He was the charming, attentive, slightly penitent husband. He bustled around, unpacking our single overnight bag, his movements light and breezy. "See, Hal," he said, gesturing to the floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the black, churning ocean. "This is what we needed. No phones, no board meetings, just us." "It's beautiful, Ethan," I said. My voice was a flawless recording of my former self. He had prepared dinner, a simple, elegant meal. He was a good cook. It was part of his charm. We ate at a small table, the warm lights glinting off the silverware. The entire time, my senses were screaming, every sound, the scrape of a fork, the clink of a glass, the jazz music, felt amplified, sharpened to a razor's edge. "I have something special," he said, after clearing the plates. His smile was dazzling. "I saved it, for tonight, for our new beginning." He went to the small bar cart. He was pulling out the bourbon, my bourbon, the twin bottle, planted by Nate's team, its contents a harmless, ink-laced trap. "You know," he said, his back to me as he worked the cork, "that announcement you made, the fund, it was brilliant." I tensed. "You thought so?" "Yes," he said. Turning around, he held the bottle. "It showed me how much pressure you're under, how much you needed this, how much you needed me to take care of you." He was spinning the narrative. My erratic act was the justification for his loving intervention. He was holding the bottle in one hand, the contaminated cork in the other. His fingertips, the ones that had touched the UV-saturated cork, were now marked. He was carrying his own conviction. There was a sharp, sudden knock at the front door. Ethan froze. His smile did not just falter. It collapsed. This was not in his script. The romantic, isolated narrative had just been broken. "Who the hell is that?" he hissed, genuine panic in his voice. He stalked to the door. I could see the entryway from my seat. It was Caleb. He looked windswept, anxious, and furious. He was clutching a leather briefcase. "Caleb?" Ethan said, his voice a strained whisper. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. Change of plans, Caleb snapped, pushing past him. He did not look at me. He was scanning the room, his eyes darting to the staircase, the windows. Tessa's moved up the timeline. She called an emergency board meeting. 11:30 tonight. She's trying to lock me out. What? Ethan was pale. It doesn't matter, Caleb said, dropping his briefcase on a chair. It landed with a heavy metallic thud. It will be too late. She just needs to be indisposed before that call. Is it done? The question hung in the air, thick and toxic. I was handling it, Ethan said, gesturing weakly to the bourbon bottle. Good. Handle it, Caleb said. He glanced at me, his smile a thin reptilian mask. Hallie, sorry to interrupt. Just had to drop off some urgent papers for Ethan to review. I'll only be 10 minutes. He was lying. He was here to supervise. He was here to make sure the failed artist did not lose his nerve. As Ethan turned back to the bar, his hand shaking slightly, my burner phone in my pocket, the one mirroring his, gave a single, silent vibration. I had set it to display notifications on its dark screen. I shifted, pulling it discreetly from my pocket under the cover of the table. A new text message, from Ramon Hale. Staircase light is done. My blood ran cold. It was the signal, Plan B, the contingency for if I refused the drink, or if the poison was not enough. The faulty light on the steep, polished staircase, the tragic accident, Ramon, the concierge, was confirming his part of the murder plot. A drink, Caleb? Ethan asked, his voice strained. Just water. I'm driving. Ethan poured a water for Caleb, and then he picked up the bourbon bottle. He selected a heavy crystal tumbler, the same kind I had seen in our apartment, the one with the waxy lip balm. He poured, the amber liquid, saturated with invisible ink, splashed into the glass. His fingers, already marked, brushed against the rim of the glass as he set it down. The entire weapon was now glowing blue under a light only I could see. To us, Hal, he said, sliding the glass across the table toward me. To a fresh start. He was watching me. Caleb was watching me. As I reached for the glass, Caleb's own phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face tightened. I have to take this. It's Ivy. He turned away from us, walking toward the window, and accepted the video call. I turned my head slightly. The pinhole camera Nate had installed in the mantel clock had a perfect view of Caleb. On the screen of his phone, Ivy Lake's face was sharp and impatient. Caleb, is she indisposed? Ivy's voice was a tinny whisper, but the room was dead silent. I am at the courthouse with the judge's clerk. I need to file the emergency POA before the 10 o'clock cutoff. Has she signed the proxy? Not yet, Caleb hissed back, shooting an angry look over his shoulder at Ethan. He's working on it. Just be ready. This was it, the entire conspiracy, captured in a single frame, the corporate arm, the legal arm, and the domestic arm, all coordinating the final strike. I looked at the glass. I looked at Ethan. I picked it up. I swirled the liquid, watching the light play in it. I could smell it. Underneath the familiar scent of caramel and oak, there was a sharp, bitter, acrid note. The scent of aconitine, the smell of my own death. It's strong, I said, my voice soft. I lifted the glass. I saw Ethan's shoulders relax. A small sigh of relief. I saw Caleb watch me, his eyes cold and dead. I tilted the glass to my lips. I let the rim touch my mouth, and I let a single, minuscule drop of the liquid pass onto my tongue. It was bitter, instantly numbing, but I did not swallow. Instead, I let the liquid touch the ring on my right hand. The band was a marvel, designed by Nate's lab. A microfilament in the setting absorbed the sample, the internal assay instantly testing the liquid. I set the glass down. You're right, I whispered, touching my mouth. Let me get some water. As I stood, a notification flashed on Ethan's phone, which he had left face up on the dining table. It was not a text. It was a push alert from a secure messaging app I had never seen before. Wave file okay, her voice passes. The deepfake. They had done it. They had perfected my voice. They had the poison to incapacitate me, the legal papers to seize my shares, and the synthetic voice to drain my accounts. My watch vibrated against my wrist, a single, sharp pulse. It was not the alarm, it was the signal from Nate. He was in the unmarked surveillance van parked on the access road, a quarter-mile away. The feed from the house was clear, the audio was admissible, the video call with Ivy was captured. The assay from my ring had transmitted, confirming the presence of aconitine alkaloids. They had everything. They had the overt act. I sat back down. I did not get the water. I looked at Ethan. He was smiling. A look of profound, tragic relief on his face. He believed I had taken the first sip. He believed the clock had started. He leaned in close, his voice a conspiratorial whisper, so low that Caleb could not hear him. His hand, the one I now knew was stained with invisible proof, covered mine on the table. "We're finally going to start over, Hal," he whispered, his eyes shining with false sincerity. "Just us, the way it was always supposed to be." I looked into the eyes of the man who had just served me my own death warrant. The trap was not for me, it was for him, and it had just snapped shut. I smiled, a cold, sharp, final smile. "Yes, darling," I said. "Finally." My smile held him, a mirror reflecting his own triumph. He thought he had won. He was leaning in, still whispering about our future, when my right hand, which had been resting on the table, shot up. It was not a slap. It was a calculated strike, my forearm connecting with the base of the heavy tumbler. It was not a delicate spill. It was an explosion. The glass flew from my grip, the poisoned bourbon, laced with the invisible, high-adhesion ink, erupted. It was a wave of clear toxic liquid that arced across the table. It splashed onto the front of Ethan's pristine shirt, soaking the fabric. It sprayed across the back of Caleb's hand as he turned, startled, from his video call. It coated the table, the floor, and my own hand. Both men froze, stunned by the sudden, messy violence. The jazz music in the background seemed to stutter. "Hallie!" Ethan yelled, jumping back, his voice a shocked bark. "What the hell?" Caleb swore, shaking his hand, scattering drops of glowing poison onto the floor. "It's on my suit." "You're right," I said. My voice was no longer the soft, broken whisper of my performance. It was cold, clear, and cut through the room like a scalpel. "It is." I lifted my left wrist. I pressed the winder on the watch, twice. The first press was a silent, digital scream, the alarm that told the district attorney's team, staged less than a quarter-mile down the access road, that the overt act was complete. The trap was sprung. The second press activated the winder itself, the face of the watch, my elegant timepiece, erupted with a brilliant, focused beam of high-intensity ultraviolet light. I aimed the light. The room, which had been cast in the warm, intimate yellow of Ethan's stage, was suddenly split by a harsh, clinical, blue-white beam. I trained it on Ethan. He looked down at his shirt. He screamed. It was not a word. It was a high, thin sound of pure animal terror. His hands, the ones that had carefully uncorked the bottle, were glowing a sickening, electric blue. The splash pattern across his shirt was not a stain. It was a spectral wound. Every drop, every dribble, every spray, blazing like a constellation. I moved the beam to Caleb. He was frantically rubbing his hand on his pants, but the ink was designed to smear, not to fade. The back of his hand, the one that had been splashed, looked like it had been dipped in liquid lightning. "What is this?" Caleb stammered, his eyes wide, the COO's composure shattered. "What did you do?" "It's a marker," I said. My other wrist vibrated, the rapid assay ring, positive, aconitine alkaloid, lethal dose, the signal was sent. It identifies the man who touched the bottle, the man who poured the drink, the man who served me my own death warrant. "You..." Ethan's face contorted, the handsome mask melting away to reveal the raw, terrified rage beneath. "You set me up. This is a setup. She's crazy. She's the one. She did it." "It's over, Ethan." As the words left my mouth, the front door of the house did not just open, it exploded inward, the frame splintering as it was kicked open. The room flooded with motion. Noise, shouting, 2 uniformed state police officers, weapons drawn, 2 plainclothes detectives, and behind them, moving with a calm, predatory grace, was Nate Harlow, with him. Her face like carved granite, was Tessa Ward. "Police, don't move! Hands where I can see them." Ethan recoiled, scrambling backward like a crab, falling over a chair. Caleb froze, his hands, one of them glowing like a beacon, raised in the air. The lead detective, a tall woman with cold eyes, held up the warrant. "Ethan Cole, Caleb Rhodes, you are being detained on suspicion of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and the attempted murder of Hallie Medina." "Murder?" Ethan shrieked, his voice cracking into a hysterical sob. "It's a frame-up. She's the one. She's been acting insane. She poisoned her own drink. She's trying to frame me." "Then why?" the detective said, her voice devoid of emotion as she stepped forward. "Does the field assay from this ring, which just live-streamed to our lab, test positive for a lethal dose of aconitine? The same poison you and your chemist discussed in text messages?" "And why?" Nate Harlow added, his gravelly voice cutting through the room. "Is your hand glowing?" Ethan stared at his blue hand as if it were a snake that had just bitten him. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure, so total, it was almost a physical force. "You bitch!" Caleb, meanwhile, was imploding. He was shaking, his face ashen. The picture of a man watching his entire life vaporize. I'm not part of this. The drink, the poison, that was him, all him." He pointed a trembling, non-glowing finger at Ethan. "I was just holding his seat, temporarily. The board needed stability. She's been erratic. Ask anyone. She's been making unstable decisions." He was clinging to his story, the narrative he had built for the board. Tessa Ward stepped forward. She was holding a tablet. "Erratic, Caleb?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Is that why you needed to backdate your IT logs to steal her signature?" She turned the tablet screen so he could see it. "This is the root server log. It shows you, under your credentials, accessing the Berlin contract signature file 3 weeks ago at 4:18 p.m., the same time Mr. Cole's guest was in the Penthouse. And this," she tapped the screen, "is your altered log, the one you faked to show an access time of 2:17 in the morning. You're a gifted COO, Caleb, but a very sloppy criminal." Caleb looked at the proof, the digital fingerprint he thought he had wiped. He physically deflated. The air went out of him. "And Ivy," Tessa said, her gaze shifting. She nodded toward Caleb's phone. It was still clutched in his trembling, blue-stained hand. The video call was still active. Ivy Lake's face was frozen on the screen. Her mouth open, her eyes wide with horror. She had heard everything, the warrants, the accusations, the poison, the backdated logs. The lead detective walked over and peered at the phone screen. "Ivy Lake, we see you. You have just been recorded conspiring to file a fraudulent power of attorney based on an attempted homicide. Consider this a summons. Your assets are being frozen as we speak." The call clicked off. Ivy was gone. Ethan was trapped. He was cornered. He saw the officers moving toward him, one of them unhooking a pair of handcuffs. His eyes darted around the room, a wild animal looking for an escape. He saw the front door, blocked by Nate. He saw the windows, overlooking a 100-foot drop to the ocean. And then he saw the staircase. The polished wood staircase, Plan B. With a wild, guttural roar, he lunged. He did not run for the door. He ran for the stairs. "He's going for the second floor," one of the officers yelled, moving to intercept. "No, he's not," I said, my voice stopping him. Ethan scrambled to the base of the stairs. He didn't try to run up. He reached up, his glowing blue hand grabbing the wall-mounted light fixture. The one Ramon Hale had fixed. He tore it from the wall, exposing a nest of cut wires and frayed electrical tape. He was trying to destroy the evidence. He was trying to destroy Plan B. "That light?" I asked, my voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "The one you had Ramon sabotage? The one I was supposed to trip over after I fell down the stairs? That one?" The officers grabbed him, slamming him hard against the newel post. The fight went out of him, replaced by racking sobs. It was over. As they cuffed him, Nate Harlow calmly walked to the dining table and picked up Ethan's phone. He also retrieved Caleb's briefcase, which had been knocked to the floor. He opened it. It was not full of papers. It was a mobile command center, a laptop, a voice modulator. Nate handed Ethan's phone to a forensics tech who had just entered. The app on the home screen, the notification that came through 5 minutes ago, "Wave file OK," her voice passes. The tech plugged the phone into a handheld analyzer. "We have it, a secure app. It's full of audio files, training data, the deepfake. It's all here." Nate opened the laptop. "And here are the masters, the audio files of Ethan Cole, practicing his wife's voice over and over until the AI could learn it." The pieces clicked into place, one after another, a cascade of locks sealing their fate. "She drove me to it," Ethan wailed as the officers hauled him to his feet. "She was never here. She flaunted it. She was giving my money away." The detectives ignored him, marching him toward the door. Caleb did not speak. He did not cry. He was led out in silence, his head bowed, the blue stain on his hand a permanent badge of his failure. Tessa Ward looked at me, a single, sharp nod of grim victory. Nate Harlow was already bagging the poisoned bourbon bottle as evidence. I stood alone in the center of the room. The jazz music was still playing. I looked at the overturned glass. I looked at the spilled poison, glowing on the expensive wood table. I reached up and pressed the winder on my watch. The UV light clicked off. The room snapped back to its warm, yellow, intimate glow, but the evidence was no longer invisible. It was locked, and it was done. The house at Redwood Bluff was now a protected crime scene, its warm yellow lights replaced by the cold, flashing blue and red of police vehicles. I was not taken for a statement. I gave one, on my terms, in the back of the district attorney's mobile command unit, with Tessa at my side. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a cold, sharp clarity. The battle was over. The war for my company had just begun. The emergency board meeting Tessa had scheduled for 11:30 that night was no longer a trap. It was an execution. I did not attend in person. I joined via a secure video link, my face projected onto the massive screen in the Northbridge boardroom. I was still at the command unit, a blanket I did not need draped over my shoulders. The boardroom was full. Every board member was present, their faces a mixture of confusion, anger, and fear. Tessa stood at the head of the table, where I should have been. Next to her sat a grim-faced man I had never seen before. "Good evening," Tessa began, her voice cutting through the silence. "As you know, I called this meeting to address a severe breach of our bylaws. For the past several hours, I have been in cooperation with the district attorney's office regarding a multi-pronged criminal conspiracy to defraud this company. I'd like to introduce Mr. Sloan, from the Enforcement Division of the Securities and Exchange Commission, who is joining us as counsel." A wave of panic rippled through the room. The SEC? This was no longer an internal dispute. 2 hours ago, Tessa continued, our chief operating officer, Caleb Rhodes, was arrested. He is being charged with, among other things, conspiracy to commit murder, securities fraud, and aggravated wire fraud. Our CEO, Hallie Medina, was the target. The room exploded. I watched them, my face impassive on the screen. Tessa held up a hand. "There will be time for questions. First, the facts. Caleb Rhodes attempted to seize control of this company by means of a fraudulent bylaw amendment. She projected the root server logs onto the screen, the same ones she had shown Caleb, the raw, unalterable data. "Here," she said, her laser pointer highlighting a line of code, "is Caleb's terminal at 4:18 p.m. 3 weeks ago, accessing and extracting Hallie's secure digital signature, and here," she clicked, "is his falsified log, timestamped at 2:17 a.m., designed to cover his tracks. He used this stolen signature to draft a phantom fund, attempt to file a fraudulent power of attorney, and, most critically, to insert the incapacitation clause into the board proposals. He then deployed malware to hijack your proxy votes to force it through." The board members looked ill. They had been targets themselves, their authority nearly stolen. "Mr. Sloan from the SEC finally spoke, his voice heavy. "As of 9 o'clock tonight, at the request of the DA and in light of this clear evidence of market manipulation and digital fraud, the SEC has placed a temporary freeze on all shares associated with Mr. Rhodes, the Northbridge Talent Fund, and Ivy Lake. Any attempted transfers are void." The first domino had fallen. Caleb's corporate power was neutralized. But the conspiracy was a web, and I intended to burn every thread. "Tessa," I said, my voice filling the room. They all turned to my image on the screen. "The building, Skylark Tower." Tessa nodded. While the DA was securing the Redwood House, a separate team, led by our private investigator, was serving a warrant at the Skylark Tower. They were investigating the undesignated service ID that accessed my floor. She projected a new file, the building's internal staff logs. The undesignated ID was not a ghost key, it was a physical master fob, issued by the head concierge, Ramon Hale, in violation of all building protocols. It was a key he was not authorized to possess. But when the police had arrived at the front desk, Ramon Hale was gone. He had panicked. The moment Caleb missed his all-clear check-in, Ramon had grabbed his coat, his wallet, and one other item, the server hard drive from the security office that contained the original, unaltered logs, the logs that showed his access, the cloned fobs, the camera outage. It was his insurance policy, and his death warrant. He was in his car, a late-model sedan, fleeing north on the interstate, headed for the Canadian border. He was desperate, driving well over the speed limit. What he did not know was that Nate Harlow did not just tag assets, he tagged conspirators. When Caleb Rhodes had been arrested, Nate had calmly walked over to the leather briefcase, the one containing the deepfake laptop. He had done more than just open it. He had retrieved a small, legal, battery-powered AirTag, which he had slipped into the lining of the case during his initial surveillance in the parking garage. He was a corporate security specialist. He tracked everything. When Caleb was arrested and the bag was taken into evidence, Nate had simply retrieved it from the detective. "My client's personal property," he had murmured, and he had transferred the small, quarter-sized tag to his own pocket. Except it was not the only tag. A second tag, placed there weeks ago, was still active. It was not in the briefcase. It was in the lining of Caleb's glove, the one he had been wearing that night, the one now stained with poison. No, that was wrong. I was mixing up the evidence. Nate was smarter than that. Let me refocus. The AirTag. It had to be on something that would travel with the conspirator. Tessa clarified. Mr. Rhodes's briefcase, which he brought to Redwood, was not his only bag. He had an identical one in his office. Our investigator, Mr. Harlow, anticipating a flight risk, secured a warrant to place a tracker on all of Mr. Rhodes's personal effects weeks ago, including the keys to his car, which he lent to Ramon Hale this evening. No, that was too complex. The outline was simpler. A court-authorized AirTag hidden in Caleb's briefcase helped investigators track Ramon. Let's trace it. Caleb was at Redwood. Ramon was in the city. How did Caleb's bag help find Ramon? It did not. It was not Caleb's bag. It must have been Ramon's. No, the outline is specific. Caleb's bag. Think, how? Perhaps Caleb had given Ramon the bag? Yes, That made sense. A payment. Tessa continued. What Mr. Hale did not know was that the briefcase Mr. Rhodes had given him 2 days ago, a bonus for his cooperation, filled with cash, also contained a legal, court-authorized GPS tracker. That was the link. The payment was the vector. Mr. Hale fled, Tessa said, pulling up a live map on the screen. A single red dot was pulsing, moving fast up I-5. He is currently approaching the Summit Gate toll plaza, and state police are waiting for him. We watched, in real time, as the red dot on the map slowed and then stopped. A few moments later, Tessa's phone buzzed. He is in custody, she announced. The board let out a collective sigh. And they have the drive. What was on it? One of the board members asked. Everything, I said, my voice cutting in. The real logs, the ones that show Ramon Hale manually disabling my landing camera, citing a maintenance fault, the ones showing him cloning Ethan's fob, and we believe this. Tessa projected a final image from the Skylark investigation. It was a hand-drawn diagram, found in Ramon's locker. It was a schematic of my penthouse. There were notes in the margins. Camera loop, 4:15 p.m. Cache, and another, more chilling note. Staircase light, main hall, loosened fitting, check breaker, bonus. The schematic for Plan B, the final piece of the physical conspiracy. The aftershocks were not just corporate, they were legal. The net was closing on the final conspirator. Ivy Lake, the SEC counsel, Mr. Sloan, spoke again. She is currently subject to a federal warrant. Her assets are frozen, but the DA's office in Oregon just received a very helpful anonymous tip. A leak, one Nate had likely arranged. It appears, Sloan said, that Ms. Lake was the architect of a near-identical probate fraud in Portland 3 years ago. The case was dismissed due to the sudden death of the key witness. With this new, parallel case, the Oregon DA is reopening the investigation and has issued a new warrant for her arrest on suspicion of homicide. She is no longer just a white-collar criminal. She is a person of interest in a murder. The machine was being disassembled, piece by piece. But there was one last, desperate rattle from the cage. The next morning, the headlines were not what I expected. They were not about the arrests. A single, powerful story had been planted in the biggest gossip trade in the industry, clearly fed by Ethan's high-priced PR team before his communication was cut off. Hallie Medina's hysterical breakdown. CEO's erratic behavior prompts mercy intervention from husband. Sources claim media mogul is paranoid and unstable. It was the narrative they had planned to use all along, that I was overworked, insane, paranoid, that Ethan and Caleb were the victims, trying to save me from myself. My own PR team was frantic. Hallie, we have to counter this. It's gaining traction. You do not counter a lie with a statement, I said. I was in my penthouse, the real one, which had been cleared and swept by Nate's team. You counter it with an autopsy. I did not issue a press release. I authorized an exclusive live interview with the most respected forensic journalist in the country. And I did not go alone. I brought Dr. Eliza Fine, the head toxicologist for the state. I sat there, my face calm, and I laid out the truth. Not the emotional story, the timeline. At 4:18 p.m., my COO stole my signature. At 4:30, my husband's accomplice disabled my cameras. At 9:14, my husband received a text confirming a deepfake of my voice was viable. At 9:16, he received a text confirming the sabotage of his own staircase for a staircase accident, and at 9:20, he served me this. I placed a sealed evidence bag on the table. Inside was the crystal tumbler. Dr. Fine took over. The contents of this glass, and the bottle it was poured from, tested positive for a lethal dose of aconitine, a paralytic neurotoxin. The residue was also found, via UV marking, on Mr. Cole's hands and Mr. Rhodes's glove, samples now in police custody. This was not an intervention. This was a chemically precise, premeditated execution plan. The hysterical narrative died instantly, replaced by the cold, medical facts of an assassination plot. The final piece was the shareholders, the money, the men and women who had backed Northbridge. They had been wavering, spooked by my erratic dividend pledge. Tessa and I held a private call with our top 5 investors. We did not plead. We presented. We showed them the server logs. We showed them the schematic from Ramon's locker. We showed them the police report, confirming the poison match. Caleb Rhodes tried to steal your money and your vote, Tessa said. Hallie Medina stopped him. Her dividend pledge was not an act of insanity. It was a strategic move that rattled the conspirators and forced their hand, revealing their true motive, not dividends, but a hostile, illegal seizure of the company's core assets. The largest shareholder, a man who had questioned my leadership just a week before, was the first to speak. His voice was grim. Hallie, we are behind you. 100%. Lock down the company. Do what you need to do. The war was over. I had my company back. That evening, the final report came from the DA's office, a formality, but a necessary one. The lab results are conclusive. Mrs. Medina, the specific aconitine alkaloid signature from the sample in the bourbon bottle is a perfect chemical match to the residue lifted from Mr. Rhodes's glove. The case is ironclad. Every link was forged, every piece connected. Every conspirator was either in a cell or, in Ivy Lake's case, was the subject of a multi-state manhunt. The aftershocks had settled. The ground was stable again. I stand on the helipad of the Skylark Tower. It was supposed to be my escape route, the private exit I used when the city became too much. Tonight, it is a stage, walled in by the night sky. The wind coming off the Weston City Harbor is a physical force, cold and relentless, whipping my hair across my face. The concrete is damp, slick with a fine mist that reflects the flashing, chaotic pulse of red and blue lights. The entire rooftop, my private sanctuary, is contaminated with uniformed officers, detectives, and lawyers. The city glitters below us, a silent, beautiful audience to this final, ugly act. The doors to the private elevator, the one that used to carry me home, slide open. They do not bring me home. They bring the wreckage. Ethan is first. He is flanked by 2 detectives I do not recognize. He is not the man I married. He is not even the man who tried to kill me. The defiant rage from the Redwood house, the slick charm from our penthouse, both are gone. He is just diminished. His expensive clothes are rumpled, his skin a pale, sallow gray under the harsh police lights. His hands are cuffed behind his back. A woman in a severe dark suit, someone I recognize from the DA's Financial Crimes Unit, steps forward to meet them, holding a new warrant. Ethan Cole, she says, her voice loud enough to cut through the wind. In addition to the charges of conspiracy to commit murder and aggravated assault, you are now also being charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and the illegal use of synthesized voice data for the purposes of financial deception. Ethan just stares at her, his eyes blank, the deepfake, the bank fraud. It is the one part of the plan he never truly seemed to grasp, the poison, the staircase. That was theater he understood. This digital crime, this theft of my very voice, is a language he cannot speak. The elevator returns and opens again. This time, it is Ramon Hale, the concierge. He is not in cuffs. He looks small, pathetic, his uniform jacket too large for him. He sees me and he cannot hold my gaze, his eyes darting to the wet concrete, to the skyline, anywhere but at me. Nate is standing near him, a shadow among the officials. Ramon, Nate says, his voice a low gravel. Tell her, the way you told the detectives. Ramon's hands are shaking. He clasps them in front of him. He told me he knew about the markers, he whispers, his voice thin in the wind. My debts, he said he would clear them, all of it, $100,000. What did he ask you to do, Ramon? I ask. My voice is steady. It does not shake. He said he needed to watch his wife. He said you were unstable, that you were a danger to the company, that he was trying to protect you. He said he just needed proof. He told me to clone the fob 02. He told me to give a copy to his security consultant, the man in the green coat. He takes a shaky breath. He told me to cut the camera feed to your landing, to put up the maintenance sign. He told me exactly when, 4:15 p.m., for 45 minutes. And the staircase? I ask. The words feel like shards of ice. Ramon flinches. A full-body tremor. That was later. That was for the bonus. He said, if she is going to have an accident, she needs to have it in the dark. He told me to go up on a service call, to loosen the fixture on the main stairs, to make it look like a faulty wire. He said it just needed to fail when she was walking down. Hearing this, hearing his meticulous, cowardly plan laid bare by the man he had bought, Ethan finally breaks. The apathy shatters, and the pure, undiluted rage I saw at Redwood explodes to the surface. It is not the rage of a man who was caught. It is the rage of a man who has been exposed. "She deserved it!" he screams. The sound is torn from his throat, a raw, animal noise that echoes against the glass walls of the rooftop lounge. He lunges, a sudden violent movement against the detectives holding him. "She deserved all of it." The officers restrain him, but he is looking only at me, his face contorted. "She was never here," he shrieks, his voice cracking. "She was never home. I was there. I was always there, waiting. In that giant, empty apartment. You were never there. You were married to the office. You were married to the board meetings, married to the quarterly reports." He is sobbing now, but it is not a cry of remorse. It is a tantrum of profound, bottomless self-pity. "I gave up my music for you. I gave up my entire life. And what was I? I was just the guy who lived in Hallie Medina's penthouse, the artist in residence. You left me alone. You left me with nothing." There it is, the truth. Not the $900 million company, not the grand, calculated theft. It was the petty, burning, acidic resentment of a small man living in a big shadow. He did not want to steal my company. He wanted to punish me for not making him the center of my life. He wanted to burn down the kingdom because he was not the king. I do not answer him. I do not scream back. I simply reach into the pocket of my coat. I pull out the small, secure digital audio player Nate had given me. I look at the DA. He nods. I press play. The wind tries to tear the sound away, but the speaker is powerful. It is Caleb's voice, cold and precise, captured from the surveillance. "Just need 48 hours of her being unreachable. 48 hours, and the company is mine." Then, Ethan's voice, panicked, desperate. "But the money, Caleb, the dividends, they're worthless." And Caleb again, the sound of ice snapping. "The dividends are worthless, you idiot. The control is not—" I press stop. The silence that falls on the rooftop is absolute, heavier than the wind. Ethan is staring at the audio player, his mouth open, the words of his own betrayal hanging in the air. A man in a suit, someone I have not seen before, steps forward. He is holding the laptop, the one from Caleb's briefcase. "I am from the DA's audio forensics unit," he says, addressing the prosecutor, but looking directly at Ethan. "We have analyzed the training files on this device. This," he points to a complex waveform on his screen, a spectral analysis of my voice, "is the frequency of Mrs. Medina's real voice, taken from her public interviews, and this," he points to a second, nearly identical pattern, "is the synthesized file, the wave file that passed. The breath markers are artificial, the sibilance is synthetic. This is the file you used to attempt to defraud the bank." He hits another key, and this is the raw audio of Mr. Cole, practicing, in this very penthouse. Ethan's voice, distorted, trying to sound like me, fills the air. "Mark, please, I need this done. Mark, please, I need this done." The final lock clicks into place. The financial fraud charge is undeniable, preserved in code. The detectives holding Ethan's arms do not wait. They spin him around, roughly, the sound of the handcuffs being double locked. A sharp, metallic click-click cuts through the night. It is the sound of an ending. I look past him. Caleb Rhodes is standing near the elevator, his high-priced lawyer at his side. He has not said a word. He is in a fresh suit. He looks like he is ready for a board meeting, not a cell. But his head is bowed. He just stares at the wet concrete. A man who flew too high and has just realized he has no parachute. Near him, Ramon Hale is sitting at a small service table. He is signing the pages of his confession. His hand is shaking so badly he can barely hold the pen. My phone buzzes in my pocket. A single, short vibration. It is a text from Nate. Ivy Lake is in custody. They stopped her at the Oregon border. Her records are frozen. It is done. The detectives begin to move Ethan toward the elevator. The perp walk is beginning. "Move it," one of them says, shoving him forward. As he passes me, he stops, his last-ditch effort. He looks at me, his face a mask of confusion, hatred, and pathetic, defeated hope. He looks like a child who still cannot understand how he lost the game. "Hallie," he whispers. "Hal, please." I just look at him. I say nothing. There is nothing left to say. The elevator doors open. He is pushed inside, along with Caleb and the officers. The doors slide shut, a final, gleaming seal. I walk to the edge of the helipad, past the roaring wind, and I look down. The street below is not a street. It is a sea of light, a blinding, frantic explosion of cameras, media vans, and reporters, all held back by a police barricade. The flashbulbs are going off in a silent, epileptic frenzy, like 1,000 stars dying at once. And I see her, standing across the street, away from the media scrum, under a street lamp. She is wrapped in a coat, her hand over her mouth. Eloise Grant, my neighbor, the woman who saw a green coat and smelled cedarwood, the woman who lit the fuse that burned my old life to the ground. She is staring up, right at me. I cannot be sure from this distance, but I think she nods. I turn away from the edge. The rooftop is quiet now. The lawyers and prosecutors are gathering their briefcases. Their work here finished. The wind feels different. It is just wind. I do not take the private elevator. I take the service elevator, the one Ramon used. It smells of grease and cleaner. I emerge not in the grand lobby, but onto a side street, 50 yards from the main entrance. It does not matter. They find me. The media. They descend. A shouting, crushing wall of bodies and microphones and blinding lights. "Mrs. Medina, is it true?" "Hallie, what happened in there?" "Was your husband trying to kill you?" "Is it true about the COO?" I do not speak. I do not look at them. I just walk. Nate is there, a solid presence, clearing a path through the chaos. He opens the door to a black, armored sedan that is waiting at the curb. I get in. I sit down on the cold leather. I look straight ahead. Through the tinted glass, I see the marked patrol car, the one holding Ethan, pull away from the curb and disappear into traffic. The door of my own car closes. It makes a heavy, solid, final sound, a thud. I look straight ahead, through the windshield. As the car pulls into the night, it is not a victory. There is no triumph. It is not a loss. It is simply the truth. It is the end of the story. It is the lock, snapping shut. Thank you for listening to my story. I am so curious where you are all listening from. So please comment below and let me know. I would love to connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.